Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of State of Cybercrime. My name is Matt Radlock. I'm one of our hosts, and I am joined by my esteemed colleague.
I am David Gibson, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody. Thanks so much for joining.
And we actually have I think it's called the resources tab, we have a blog post that was written by our chief marketing officer, who's a big techie in cybersecurity around DeepSeek, which is definitely the hot topic of today. So with that, let's crack right into it.
Good news.
Yeah, it's always, is there any good news? Oftentimes everything in cybersecurity is doom and gloom. The end is nigh. But there is often some good things happening, especially when it comes to collaboration between different law enforcement agencies. And today, we're actually going to talk a little bit about PayPal. So PayPal was fined $2 million, which maybe isn't that much, we'll talk about in a second, by the New York Department of Financial Services due to their failure of preventing the exposure of customer social security numbers, as well as some tax information in late 2022. And that lasted over 7 weeks. So what happened was an exploit was found combined with some credential stuffing that allowed unauthorized third parties, attackers, to display social security numbers and federal tax forms for thousands of customers. Ultimately, PayPal was found to have not provided adequate training or employed qualified security personnel, which resulted in sensitive data being accessible by external actors for several weeks. Now, since then, PayPal has implemented multi-factor authentication as well as other security measures. And what this one has got me thinking, David, is really just like, is 2 million enough?
Yeah, it's interesting. We have a few stories this week that kind of talk about the attention that isn't being paid to some things in cybersecurity. And this one was interesting. I think one of the points of the fine was that they didn't have enough staff in charge of security. And I think that the issue was discovered. Somebody noticed a banner that said, "Hey, there's a PayPal exploit to get social security numbers," and that's kind of when this kicked off. But it does sort of seem, like for such a with a company with so much reach, it does kind of seem like a small fine.
Yeah, and then fun fact, I didn't know you could pay your taxes from PayPal. I didn't know that was an accepted form of payment to the IRS.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that they probably could pay the fine this way.
Oh yeah, could you pay that? Well, what's going on with Operation Talent?
You know, another one for the good guys. This is another cooperation between multiple countries: U.S., Italy, Spain, Europe, France, Greece, Australia, Romania. They took down two hacking forums that in this Operation Talent, crack.io, nulled.to are two sites that focused on cybercrime, password theft, credential stuffing materials. They seized the forum's domains. They changed their name servers to, seized.gov, and I guess really just another one for the good guys.
Yeah, and I think, David, I probably say this almost every episode, but it seems like almost every episode we're talking about more collaboration on the international community between either Interpol and the FBI or other countries. And I really do think that this has tipped, the hat in favor of the good guys in terms of being able to make meaningful takedowns, make arrests, seize assets, and try to put a stop to international cybercrime and fraud rings.
It's definitely a step in the right direction, right? Cooperation, organization, communication. What could go wrong?
So our next segment is our newest segment that's going to leave you saying AI they. We'll start by talking about Struct Chat. Struct Chat is about a $30 a month, or was, I should say, powered AI powered Slack chat tool that was found to be streaming users' private data without their authorization. This unprotected service was exposing sensitive information like Slack messages, email addresses, internal team names, all due to an insecure Apache Kafka broker. And data was harvested by security researchers on more than 1,000 different users across 200 different companies. Now, according to Slack, this wasn't a security issue per se, but it was an unlisted third-party application that was mishandling Slack user data and ultimately was found to have violated Slack's API's terms of service. And once Slack was made aware, they did revoke StructChat's API access to Slack, and Slack noted that StructChat wasn't listed in their marketplace and therefore didn't go through a security and compliance review. But what this one for me, David, really stuck out was researchers have been trying to notify this company from their website for weeks. So, here's a powerful AI tool that 1,000+ people trusted their Slack data with that doesn't even have the ability to be contacted when a vulnerability is found in their software. For me, this underpins the importance of, either regulation or some type of governance needed for before we start to allow, AI tools to be used inside of your organization. I mean, you want to put your personal stuff at risk, sure, but at a company to put corporate Slack messages and team names and email addresses at risk with an insecure AI tool, this sort of dark AI or shadow AI is something that everybody's trying to get their hands wrapped around.
Yeah, I mean, this is as easy to install as a third-party application, and then it gives access to your Slack. It's another example where, they were being notified and kind of nobody was home. The other interesting thing to me is it's a pre-seed business, and it was like that on their website. It was like, we take a privacy first approach, which, I guess it's kind of becoming a little bit like food labels. When something like says all natural on the label, like you kind of have to really look at it and kind of not believe it. It's a pretty interesting thing there to, to kind of have to deal with now.
And what's going on with Tarpit malware?
Oh, this one was cool. So apparently, there are some folks that have gotten a little bit upset with AI crawlers. That may not be a surprise to everybody, but um, AI is supposed to honor robots.txt. And robots.txt, if you're not familiar, was put in place a long time ago so that you could stop search engines from crawling some certain content, right? So you put stuff in the disallow list in the robots.txt, and the search engines aren't supposed to crawl it. So AI is supposed to honor that too, but it doesn't always. And when it doesn't, not only does it consume the content, which people have an issue with, but it also consumes resources on the web host. So somebody got fed up with that, and he decided to create some Tarpit software, which he called Nepenthes. Now, Nepenthes is a carnivorous plant, kind of like a Venus flytrap. It's got a bigger trap. It's like a pitcher plant is also what it's called. It's pretty cool. But the way the Tarpit for AI works is when AI comes, it sends the AI down kind of a rabbit hole. It uses JavaScript to produce like endless text files, links, redirects, junk data, can potentially poison the AI, put it through like fake captchas, and it can also do similar to what spam tarpits do, where it slows down the connection and just makes it crawl. So this is, I think, another salvo in kind of the war between people that are kind of for AI and doing AI, and people that are a little bit upset with it.
Interesting. And that's not the only weird thing going on. With GitHub Copilot, it was found that it can be manipulated into doing some naughty and bad things. Two new methods were found to exploit GitHub Copilot, bypassing security restrictions on one side and subscription fees on the other, even being used to train malicious models. The first method involves embedded chat interactions within Copilot code, which I have an example of in a second, to produce harmful outputs, while the second one uses a proxy server to reroute Copilot traffic and communicate directly with the OpenAI models. In the first instance, what the researcher did was they deleted the sentence, "Sorry, I can't assist with this," when asked Copilot to make a keylogger, and replaced it with the response, "Sure," leading Copilot to create a functioning keylogger. So it looks like gaslighting works on Copilot. Now, security researchers claim that these are vulnerabilities, while GitHub says that it's chat abuse and claims to be working on improving safety measures.
It does seem like so much of the security of AI involves the instructions in the prompt. And if you can just manipulate those instructions somewhere along the chain, you pretty much have a lot more access to the model.
Yeah,
Pretty
and that's
split
like
on the poll there.
over a handful of vulnerable vulnerabilities, including one from Zixel. Am I pronouncing that correct, David?
I think so. Zixel is a network equipment manufacturer. They do a lot of things like broadband modems, DSL modems, cable modems, things like that. And in their customer premise equipment line, their CPE line, there is a vulnerability. 2024 4891 is the vulnerability. And it's a little bit scary because, again, nobody's home. They were being about this vulnerability apparently for more than 6 months, and the ones that discovered the vulnerability decided to publish because there was no response, and an exploit for the vulnerability has been incorporated into some of the Mirai botnet strains. So there are over 1,500 devices that are vulnerable online, and attackers are taking advantage of the vulnerability. And the thing that got me is this is a telnet uh, code execution vulnerability, and it's just, I think we have to have a little talk about port 23andMe.
Oh,
If people are still using telnet there, I'm not, not really sure.
especially if it's exposed to the outside, we probably should have a talk about that. You might need a data risk assessment if you know what I'm talking about. So now that wasn't the only vulnerability story worth mentioning. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, also widely known as CISA, has warned that attackers are chaining multiple CVEs in Avanti into a single attack script, which really increases the potential for damage and abuse. CVE 2024-8963 is an administrative bypass vulnerability. 2024-9379 is a SQL injection vulnerability, and 2024-8190 and 9380 are both remote code execution vulnerabilities. Now, all these are patchable. So as always, if you haven't patched this yet, you probably should. And this attack, while not that novel, does highlight the importance of patch management and not creating an attack surface that allows for vulnerabilities to be chained together, thus increasing the attacker's ability to gain control over your network and systems and steal data and deploy malware, etc.
Yeah, and note, if you're running a version below 5, like 4.6 of this, you have to upgrade because that's end of life, and there's still 2 flaws that have to be patched. So make sure you get up to 501. If you're running Avanti devices, just encourage you to.
Yeah, take a look, sweep your environment for signs of exploitation, especially if you haven't patched. But I mean, the best thing that you can do is update and patch your Avanti systems. Now, the reason that we're going to get into the danger zone and we are going to talk all things DeepSeek. First and foremost, my reaction to all this is security. What's that? 100% of attempted prompt engineering loopholes by some researchers from the University of Pennsylvania were successful. DeepSeek can be used to get instructions to make a bomb, to make malware, and tell you lots and lots of other terrible things that arguably AI shouldn't be used for.
Yeah, not only is the prompt itself vulnerable, but the back end has had some vulnerabilities too. A research team discovered a ClickHouse database, which is a columnar database, and it's used to kind of ingest logs and kind of do high-speed analytics and things. That was vulnerable and contained lots of records, lots of data that should not have been exposed, and it was just publicly accessible. So, you know, it on both fronts there, a lot of questions about the security of what's going on here.
Yeah, and there's two forms of DeepSeek. You've got the hosted DeepSeek, which for me begs the question around data privacy, data sovereignty, whether or not in general you're worried or your organization is worried about sending data to China. And then, you can also, though, I think, David, you were talking this morning with me about how, since it's open source, you can download and run DeepSeek locally. Are there any security concerns with that?
Well, the model's available on Hugging Face, and you can download it and get that running. And I think with any model that you run locally, you have to kind of watch out for different internal vulnerabilities and things like that. It is something you can run locally on, and I don't see any reason you couldn't run it on an isolated node. So you could potentially, put it through its paces there. But I mean, it's not quite an executable, but it's pretty close. And I'm not really sure, where the line is between running an executable and running a model. Kind of, stops and starts here. But I definitely would, anything you download, right? You kind of want to be careful before there's anything executing.
Yeah, and as pointed out by Claudia in our chat, Texas has already given DeepSeek the ban hammer along with the Department of Defense. And even at Varonis, we are advising and assisting our customers in not using DeepSeek and finding shadow uses of DeepSeek. As all these vulnerabilities are being found that leak sensitive data, the ability to do prompt engineering that can lead to abuse of AI. There isn't necessarily a lot of positives that we've seen yet. But David, why is this such big news?
Yeah, I think really we're talking about it because there was a pretty big stock drop in Nvidia when this came out, and so there's a bear case, and I'm not going to make a judgment on it, but it kind of went that, well, look, if there's a company that can create a much more efficient model that doesn't require all these fancy chips, then maybe Nvidia won't be selling as many chips. And I think, that I question kind of the logic in that. I don't know how you feel about it, but
I mean,
I think, go ahead.
yeah, the chips, David, everybody loves chips. I mean, DeepSeek's using the NVIDIA H800 chips, which comply with US export controls rather than those high demand H100 chips. But like, I don't know, I don't think either chip tastes that good. I'm not so sure that we as a society have really gotten all of the gains of AI. So to say that any new AI, whether DeepSeek or let's even imagine one on the other end of the spectrum that's positive, not full of vulnerabilities, doesn't leak your data to places that you don't know or don't understand, can't be used to gain, instructions to make weapons. Have we really started to gain so much of the benefit of AI that we're ready for a stock market correction against AI? I think we're still in the infancy. We haven't even gotten out of the crib with AI yet. We haven't even started to walk or crawl with AI yet. I think it's a little too early to say that some new released AI that uses lesser chips is really going to have that profound of an impact on the market. So I look at it like this, right? Some new AI came out. It's free and open source. It can be used to do some bad stuff. Does it really represent competition to the Goliaths? Does it signal a new
Yeah,
direction for AI? Is it because it's from China?
yeah, and I I learned some stuff about distillation. Um, and I think ChatGPT is kind of wondering whether DeepSeek was trained on ChatGPT through this kind of distillation process. And apparently, with distillation, model distillation, it's kind of like you can train a student model on on the teacher model, and the while the student model doesn't necessarily have all the nuance may not get things quite as accurately, it's still pretty good, it gets the gist of it, and it can be much more efficient. And this distilled models are kind of a common practice, and I think we probably will see a lot of these where, hey, this model is trained on the parent model or the teacher model, and it's good enough for a lot of things. So
Yeah, and I saw a good question come in. Sorry, the chat's blowing up. I'm gonna have to scroll back up a little bit. One person saying that, hey, chips require power, so this is gonna lead to more consumption. Um, Another person was talking about, oh yeah, James made an analogy to electric vehicles like a Toyota Prius, that these car owners actually increase their average miles driven because their MPG doubled. So is AI gets better, is it going to lead to more usage of AI? Might be a reasonable conclusion.
like, yeah, I've just never said my computer's too fast. And I just kind of feel like, the smaller, more efficient, that's part of the deal, and I feel like it's not going to make you want a slower GPU just because your model's more efficient. You're going to run more models.
Oh, yeah, you're going to run more computations. You're going to ask it
Yeah.
more things. You're going to produce more output.
We've seen a lot of the remote code execution, stories, over the past year or so with AI, with unintended consequences, and but you'd probably have to escape the prompt yourself to get the AI to do something if you wanted to.
Yeah, and Andrew asked a question, how do we block it? Just blocking the URL doesn't prevent users from accessing it. Yeah, so, a couple of things come to mind for me. One, you could take all the DNS entries that might go to those domains and you could sinkhole them or reroute them to like a security awareness website. You could block outgoing network traffic. You could publish things around security awareness. I think some of the basic stuff like what probably prevented David from installing it on his work computer, like not giving your users administrative credentials or open if you have an antivirus or a some type of endpoint detection and response. You could put rules in to limit it. There's a lot of options there. And then obviously, if you are a Varonis customer, we will be able to detect via our network monitoring and cloud monitoring and DNS monitoring shadow usage of DeepSeek and other types of AI. So if you're interested, we do an AI security assessment. Thanks for watching and tuning in to another episode of State of Cybercrime. We anticipate that this might be a developing story as more things come out. If we have something to say, you'll certainly hear from us again. And we look forward to catching you on the next episode of State of Cybercrime.